Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back into the video from Ham on Beat, continuing with the Debunking Araki Forgot Extras. This is number 5. You know the rules. If it starts to spoil anything that I have not seen, read, etc., so we go from after Stone Ocean, then I will either be skipping ahead or finishing the video there. So let's get into it.
I'm on the beat.
Welcome back to Debunking Araki Forgot. This time we'll be taking a look at more topics that have yet to be covered, as well as ones I feel like need more fleshing out. A few months ago, I was finally able to complete the debunking video for the 8th part, JoJolion. Now that that's out of the way, these extras videos have the opportunity to cover topics from JoJolion that I might have missed. The first topic involves Dio. They ask why Dio didn't use his hypnotism again like he did against Jack the Ripper in part 1. The answer is that he never really stopped doing this. Dio continued using his supernatural powers of charisma to recruit allies in part 3.
So true.
However, some people need more convincing than others. Dio's dialogue in the scene with Jack gives us a clue. He mentions that most people have some amount of good in their hearts. This may mean that good people are less susceptible to Dio's hypnosis.
Than others, right?
We learned later that Kakyoin fell under Dio's charisma when they first met. However, the effects of this are temporary. Avdol was also enamored by Dio's presence when he encountered him in Egypt, but was able to break free and run away. This is the reason Dio used the flesh buds on Kakyoin and Polnareff, which were able to maintain hypnosis in stronger-minded people even from long distances.
Yeah, so like he did still control people, like, what?
For others, such as Jack and most of the enemies in part 3, hypnosis either took complete control or was unnecessary. I'd also imagine that Dio derives some kind of sick satisfaction from controlling people with means other than hypnosis.
Yes, definitely.
Such as the fear he used to control Whole Horse.
Yeah, definitely. You're a villain. You're going to feel really good about yourself, not having to use mind control, but to be manipulative and make them do it anyway.
Another question asked why flesh buds do not die in sunlight. The simple answer to this is that they do. After Enya's death, we saw her flesh bud disintegrate in the sunlight when it was removed and exposed to it. But what they're most likely asking is why the flesh buds aren't affected while still inside the hosts. In that case, I think the fact that they're obscured underneath the host's hair is enough to shield it from the sun.
Well, that's what I would assume.
In the fight against Mariah, Joseph's hands are crushed by the escalator and both of them are seen bleeding. Some ask how this is possible, since one of these hands is actually a prosthetic. The answer is that this isn't blood, but actually the oil used to maintain the prosthetic hand. Joseph's hand is based on the technology of Stroheim's cybernetic body in part 2. When he was damaged by cars, he also appeared to bleed as well, despite being mechanical. Additionally, in the anime adaptation of part 3, the oil from Joseph's hand is actually colored differently from his blood to reflect this.
There you go.
Over time, I've gotten a ton of comments popping up asking questions related to the visibility of stands. Like how Anne was able to see Strength despite not being a stand user, or how Shinobu was able to see Stray Cat. I honestly just don't understand these kinds of questions.
Stray Cat, though, is become part of the flower that already existed. Isn't that part of it?
Now, I can understand if someone is asking this about the first couple of visible stands in the series when they're first starting out. But from just naturally going through the story, you would become familiar with the concept of stands that inhabit physical objects.
See the swords. Yeah.
I just have no idea how someone could go all the way through a series that has Strength, Yellow Temperance, Empress, Wheel of Fortune, High Priestess, Geb, Khnum, Toth, Anubis, Surface, Love Deluxe, Earth, Wind and Fire, Stray Cat, Superfly, Mr. President, White Album, Notorious B.I.G., Metallica, Oasis, Rolling Stones, Burning Down the House, Foo Fighters, Oh Lonesome Me, Cream Starter, Tomb of the Boom, Tubular Bells, Paper Moon King, Scott P. Number 1, Dr. Wu, and Wonder of You, and still not understand that there are stands which are visible to non-stand users. And I'm honestly being a bit generous and leaving out some more stands that could be on there. That's 30 stands.
Goddamn.
Of the 168 that have been featured in the main series thus far, that's a pretty sizable
That's so
number.
funny.
So it's just strange to still be asking about it as if any given visible stand is an oddity when really they're exceptionally common. Next is a comment I got regarding Avdol's father. One person claims that during the Judgment arc, Avdol's father was introduced as a new character. They say that originally, Whole Horse was set to replace Avdol in the group.
Okay.
But then at some point, Araki was forced by his editor to change this, and made Avdol be revived instead with the excuse of Avdol being disguised as his father. However, this idea not only has no actual proof behind it, but it also has multiple direct statements from Araki contradicting it. In the Jojonium Volume 13 interview, Araki talks about Avdol's fake-out death, and says that when he first wrote it, he already knew he was going to bring back Avdol in the future.
Wow.
So the idea that Avdol was originally going to stay dead and that some last-minute change was made is completely unfounded. Next is the idea of Whole Horse getting rejected in favor of Avdol coming back. This also has no proof. It is true that
Where's
for a
your
time,
source?
Araki was considering having Whole
Always
Horse
show your
join the
sources.
group. He talks about this in the Jojonium Volume 10 interview, and goes over his initial idea for having Whole Horse join. However, he goes very in-depth on his actual reasons for not going through with this idea. First, that he would throw off the balance of the group, and that his ability was too powerful due to its lack of limitations. He goes on to say that he instead chose to add Iggy to the team, since having a small animal character created a better balance for the group than another human would.
Did, and it also created one of the best stand battles, in my personal opinion, where Iggy fought the bird. That stand battle's incredible.
So this whole idea of there being some malicious editor hovering over Araki controlling his every move is just completely ridiculous. Especially when we have evidence of how friendly Araki was with his editor at that time. In fact, if anything, I would think that if there were an editor controlling Araki's writing, then the opposite would be true. In the Jojonium Volume 13 interview, Araki even says that Avdol wasn't that popular of a character. If I were an editor only concerned with what was more popular, I think actually having the fan-favorite character Whole Horse join would be the more likely option.
To go with, yeah.
So the idea of Whole Horse getting shot down in favor of Avdol is really unlikely, beyond the fact that we already know the exact reasons for these changes. Now, most normal people would just hear this long list of direct quotes from Araki and accept that their ideas are wrong. But some people are just too stubborn, since as we see here, some would rather say that Araki is lying in interviews to cover up for his mistakes than just accept that they're wrong. I got one question asking why they didn't just restrain Steely Dan in Part 3 to prevent him from injuring himself to hurt Joseph. However, this would do absolutely nothing about the spore growing inside of Joseph's brain, which was going to grow and kill him in the next 10 minutes. The whole reason that they left Jotaro with Steely Dan was to keep him away while they worked to defeat the stand and remove the spore. One question asks why Vanilla Ice became a vampire instead of a zombie, since zombies are created by having a vampire's blood injected into them. This one has a pretty simple answer, since zombies aren't created using a vampire's blood. They're created when a person is injected with vampiric essence. Vampires in JoJo have a separate fluid inside of them that they inject to create zombies. As we saw in Part 1, this was different from blood. Vanilla Ice was revived with the actual blood of a vampire, which is why he became one and not a zombie. Some have asked why at the end of Part 3, Dio was unable to move inside Jotaro's time stop, when earlier, Jotaro was able to move inside of Dio's time stop. This is because moving within someone else's time stop also depletes from your own time-stopping abilities. For example, Jotaro can stop time for a maximum of 5 seconds. If Dio were to stop time for 10 seconds, and Jotaro chose to move within stop time, then he only has those 5 seconds of movement until he's frozen again. What happened at the end of Part 3 was that Dio stopped time for the longest duration that he could to attack Jotaro. But then, immediately after the time stop ended, Jotaro stopped time on his own. Since Dio had already used up all his movement, he was now frozen in Jotaro's time stop. Another bunch of questions I've gotten ask about why Jotaro and Dio sometimes say the name of their stand when they stop time, while at other times they don't. I'm really disappointed that I even have to address something like this, since I just have to wonder if people who ask things like this have seen literally any other anime in their life, as if a character saying the name of the attack they're doing isn't just a common trope in any shonen anime ever created, as opposed to some kind of actual requirement for the use of their ability.
Do you know what, right? Instantly popped into my head the Team 4-star Boo Bits, where it's Go 10 fighting Trunks at the tournament. And he says the Kamehameha wrong and still blasts it anyway. And Trunks is like, wait, you can just say anything?
The same thing applies to whenever I get a question asking how it's possible for Dio to be monologuing during a time stop, as if they think every 5-second long time stop should be accurately represented in real time in the episode. I would think that as a species, we're beyond the why do they scream so much in Dragon Ball school of media criticism.
Crazy.
In the last video, I went over why when a person is pierced with the arrow, only certain people can transfer the power of stands to their family members. This is because this only occurs in families that have a strong psychic bond, such as the Joestars, which is why when Koichi was pierced with the arrow, his family members were not affected. However, I got a comment saying that the actual reason was because Koichi was pierced with a regular stand arrow, and not the beetle-decorated stand arrow that was used to awaken Requiem.
Okay.
Now, I've already made a video going over the beetle arrow, and how I think it doesn't actually have any specific power over the normal arrow like a lot of JoJo fans think it does. But regardless, this logic is completely flawed. While it is true that in the Part 6 example of Stan's awakening in family members this arrow was used, the comment assumes that Dio used the beetle arrow on himself to awaken the Joestar stands. This is completely unfounded since we have never seen the moment when Dio awakens his stand, which could have occurred with any of the 5 arrows Enya had purchased from Diavolo. Furthermore, Trish is also likely to have awakened her stand through her psychic link to her father, since they're shown to be able to sense each other just like the Joestars do. However, we also have no idea what arrow Diavolo used to awaken King Crimson, let alone when he actually awakened the stand. If it was before he sold the arrows, then there are 6 different ones that could have done it, and if it were after, then he only would have had access to the normal arrow that he later gave to Pulpo. So really, this whole idea of the beetle arrow having any influence over this has no evidence behind it.
There's nothing to back it up.
To whether that person is part of a special family that has a psychic link. For Part 4, some ask why Josuke had to punch through Tomoko to remove Aqua Necklace, when it was shown in Part 3 that stands can phase through bodies, like when Jotaro pumped Joseph's heart. I don't see how this would apply to this situation at all, since it's not like Jotaro removed Joseph's heart or anything. Aqua Necklace is a physical stand which occupies existing fluid, so if Josuke were to try and remove it without punching through Tomoko, he would have to somehow pick it up with Crazy Diamond's hand and bring it up back through her throat.
Yeah.
Josuke obviously wanted Tomoko to not know what was going on, which is why he punched and healed her in one go.
Just
so she
straight
never
away,
felt
yes,
anything.
it was just done.
Also,
no questions
Josuke
asked.
punched with a broken bottle and then fixed it to trap Aqua Necklace. If he were using this other method, that would not be possible and the stand would simply escape his grab. This next topic has to do with a question I've gotten a lot over the years relating to Crazy Diamond's ability. In my Debunking Araki Forgot Part 4 video, I go over why Josuke couldn't repair the button from Kira's jacket to track his location. There I said that because the button was separated from the jacket without any of the connecting thread, it became a separate object and wouldn't be able to be fixed back. Some people have brought up the scene during the Harvest fight where Shigechi unscrewed nuts and bolts from the pipe and Josuke was able to use Crazy Diamond to bring them back. They say that the nuts and bolts should be considered separate from the pipe like the button is. Talking about this topic in general means we need to get into the minutiae of Josuke's ability, which is a tricky topic. Essentially, since his ability is to fix things, whether he can do that or not entirely hinges on whether that thing is broken, and the definition of broken is pretty lax at times. I actually consider this to be a flaw with Josuke's ability, since it makes pinning down exactly what he can and cannot do very difficult.
Quite difficult, yeah.
For example, time is often a factor in whether something is considered a piece of another. During the final battle, Josuke's blood dried and was now considered a separate object from Josuke himself, but not separate from the rest of the dried blood on Kira's jacket. So it's very possible that the time since the button's removal was enough time for it to be considered separate, and the nuts and bolts were fixable since they were only just removed. Like I mentioned earlier, we also need to figure out what exactly constitutes as an object being fixed. In my opinion, the actual state of the object itself counts when it comes to this. The pipe is suspended above ground by the nuts and bolts. In this state, the bolts are an integral part of the state of the object, since without them the pipe would fall. While on the other hand, in my opinion, the button itself isn't integral to the state of the jacket. For these reasons, it's difficult to actually determine any exact answer for when the button is or isn't considered part of the jacket. I'm not even sure at this point if the button is completely unfixable back to its origin. It's a definite possibility that it still is. So I would also like to pose a separate explanation for the button problem, since that's where all this arose from. In my original video, I also mentioned another part of the argument, that since the button is so small, it would be extremely difficult to follow back to Kira. As we saw later, even when following his hand, it was an ordeal for them to keep up with it. Something like the button would be even harder to follow, and not only that, if they did lose track of it, they'd be missing their only clue to Shigechi's death. It was a smarter idea overall to track the origin of the button itself to the tailor, which did lead them straight to Kira with a lot less effort and risk. I got one comment asking what happened to Kira's hand after it left the Cinderella salon during Kira's escape. Well, considering the fact that Kira has 2 hands for the rest of Part 4, it's pretty easy to figure this one out. Especially considering that the entire purpose of the scene with Kira's hand is that it was fixed by Crazy Diamond and went back to Kira. And as if it wasn't clear enough, the narration explicitly states that Kira still has his original fingerprints on one hand, showing that the hand reattached itself to him. Near the end of Part 4, Hayato calls Josuke to come meet him, which results in him discovering Kira's identity and forcing him to deactivate Bites the Dust. I've gotten some questions asking how Hayato got Josuke's phone number to be able to do this. Well, as we saw in the previous loop, Josuke told Hayato his full name. But how would Hayato be able to get his phone number from this? Well, believe it or not, there used to be this mystical artifact called the phone book, where you can find someone's phone number based on their name. This next question has to do with Part 5.
Yes, in the UK, we called it the Yellow Pages.
They ask why when Giorno removed the key from the turtle to expose Babyface, that Trish and Bucciarati weren't removed as well, since they are living things. However, this is ignoring the properties of Babyface's ability that Trish and Bucciarati were under. His ability is to rearrange living things into inanimate objects. It's even pointed out that Giorno's ability, which is to turn objects into living things, is the exact opposite of Babyface. So since Trish and Bucciarati were in their rearranged state, they weren't really considered alive, and so wouldn't be expelled from the turtle room. This was all directly explained in the scene in question, since while Babyface was in the form of an object, he was still holding onto Giorno's eye, which was alive, which is the reason why he was brought out of the turtle. Some have asked why during the Grateful Dead fight in Part 5 that they didn't pour the cold drinks on themselves to keep cool instead of just using the ice. This is answered in the story itself, since the whole reason they find out about the ability in the first place was because they already drank the drinks, which slowed the aging of some of the team. Here's another one related to Part 5, but this technically doesn't have anything to do with Araki.
Okay.
This question is about the JoJo light novel Purple Haze Feedback, which takes place after Part 5 and tells a story with Fugo as the main character. The book has a lot of callbacks to some of the more minor characters in Part 5. For example, the son of the character Pericolo makes an appearance and now works for Giorno.
Cool.
Another one of these is that the characters of Sale and Zucchero both make appearances in the book. However, I've seen a lot of people ask how this is possible, since both characters died during Part 5. Well, as these people are clearly not aware, neither of them died. In Part 5, Bucciarati says that the two are just knocked out and were left in the boat. In Zucchero's case, this isn't really an issue at all, since despite being decapitated by Sticky Fingers, he was clearly still alive during the torture scene, showing that the zippers don't really count as a wound. And for Sale, while he was shot in the head, Mista remarked at the end of the fight that his stand was still able to stop the bullet right on time, and that he was simply knocked out.
He's still alive.
Now, obviously, this doesn't really count as an Araki Forgot topic, since Purple Haze Feedback wasn't written by Araki.
Right,
it was written by Kohei Kodono. But people seem to underestimate Kodono's knowledge of JoJo, when really, he has a great eye for the small details. Some have asked why in the Goo Goo Dolls fight, Jolene was able to cover up a camera with her strings, when, as we saw earlier, non-stand users are unable to see her strings. This isn't really an issue in the manga since no such scene happens. The shot of the camera being covered is a mistake that only is made in the anime.
Right.
Others ask how Thunder McQueen was able to see and hear Whitesnake, when presumably, Whitesnake is a non-visible stand. This question actually has more to it than it seems. First, oddly enough, it's actually somewhat likely that Whitesnake is a visible stand. At first we'd assume it isn't, since they don't draw too much attention to it. But later during the scene in the courtyard, we actually see that Whitesnake needs to retreat when it hears the guards approaching nearby.
True.
So it seems that Whitesnake actually is a visible stand.
Yeah, because otherwise why would he run away? If he wasn't a visible stand, he could just stand there, not do anything, and not be seen.
Most likely, he's physically made up of the same melting acid material that is produced by his ability. His early appearances also reflect this, with him appearing to be melting just like the acid. I got one comment asking why Poochie didn't come to Egypt after Dio told him to. Well, he did. It had already been stated in prior flashbacks that he did go to Egypt to meet Dio. In fact, he did it multiple times. Some ask how Poochie and Weather had a strong enough psychic link to both be affected by the arrow when they didn't even know each other at the time. However, whether or not two people with a psychic link actually know each other has nothing at all to do with the arrow's power being transferred through it. In the best known example of this, Dio pierced Jonathan's body and that awoke stands in all the Joestars. Neither Dio nor Jonathan knew any of the Joestars, especially not the completely estranged ones like Josuke and Giorno.
Still works,
so this
though.
has no bearing
So,
whatsoever on the strength of a psychic link. Some ask why in Part 7, Johnny first seems like he barely knows Diego, but later it was however this arc to see it, it had and placed his sound. Thank you for watching.
Okay.
This is
panic! Some interesting ones there, some very interesting points. I like when he's just like, so why didn't Poochie go see Dio? Well, he did. He went multiple times. People say that this character was killed off, when in this panel, he says, wow, he's still alive. Some of them are just so funny. The delivery is fantastic, and I can't believe he listed off like 30 stands that are visible, and people still don't get that some stands can be visible to non-stand users. Brilliant. Anyway, thank you to my patrons. If you want to have your name at the end of every video, I want to be able to watch patron-only reactions, such as the original Dragon Ball series. Links in the description to the Patreon page. $1 a month is all I ask to help support the channel. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you for that. Thank you all for watching. What do you guys think of that? What do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe if you haven't already. Leave comments down below. Let me know what I should watch just because in future videos. I'll see you guys, all you guys, next time.